Minasan, konnichiwa! There have been some incredible new insights into Final Fantasy VII Remake. From a recent article by Push Square, the producers answer a few burning questions and give us their insight into the world of Final Fantasy VII Remake. The article begins by praising Final Fantasy VII Remake and the fact that it's been received so well by fans across the globe. Yoshinori Kitase-san says that he's incredibly happy with the amount of praise that it's getting. Pertaining to how the game has been received by fans, Naoki Hamaguchi kind of shadows a sentiment that we've heard a few times before in regards to them wanting to keep the game nostalgic and memorable for fans, but also something new. And yes, I know what you're thinking. We have heard this before, but I guess this is just their way of reiterating it, since there has been quite a mixed review of how fans have received the game. When asked about the story and how they managed to expand on Midgar, Kitase-san said that he loved to expand on Midgar and creating it at greater scale. However, interestingly, Kitase-san reveals that he was the one that wanted to actually change elements of the game, whereas Nomura-san and Hamaguchi-san were intent on staying more faithful to the actual original FF7. This brings way more new insight into what we actually have been speculating as fans, because it adds a new element of truth that we weren't necessarily aware of beforehand, which is incredibly interesting because it makes you wonder all the new elements of the game, specifically the ending, which has brought about a ton of debate amongst fans and the gaming community of FF7 fandom in general. Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, where did these ideas come from? Who did it come from in particular? And as Kitase-san says, were most of the ideas from him then? Because a lot of people have been speculating online that these ideas have primarily come from Nomura-san. And now Kitase-san's actually come out and said that he was the one that was up for change in this game, whereas Nomura-san and Hamaguchi-san wanted to stay more true to the game. So it kind of just begs the question of where did these ideas come from in the first place? Was it actually Kitase-san, as he is the one that was opting for change? Or is it, as so many of the fans around the world speculate, was it in fact Nomura-san? Or could it have been a collection of the three of them just kind of having a brainstorm and coming up with this new idea all together as a team? When asked if there were any more things that he wanted to include but simply couldn't, Kitase-san said that he actually wanted to include small little elements of the mini games from FF7, the original FF7 that is, such as we might all remember that basketball game that kind of ruined all our lives at the Golden Saucer. You guys might remember this, I certainly do. Kitase-san actually wanted to include this on the way to Jesse's home. If you kind of think back, when we go on that crazy chase and Roche is like on our ass and then we end up getting to the upper plate and then we're roaming at night through that little town or through that little plate and that sector, it's very interesting because there's a little part where there's a playground and there's like a hoop and there's a basketball on the ground. I attempted to see if I could even play with it and interact with it, and all you could really do was push it around. And Kitase-san said that the reason that he didn't include this into this part of the game was only because the sound of the basketball like hitting the hoop and reverberating through this silent, empty kind of eeriness at night when they're all sneaking around and trying to like move around covertly, it just wouldn't have made and kept the same atmosphere that they were trying to achieve for that portion of the game. So they removed it, to my dismay, and I'm sure for so many of us. But he said that he did allow for it to like be pushed around and like moved around as you can kind of, move around boxes with Cloud's feet. The interviewer also asks Kitase-san if he has changed any characters in any kind of notable way. Kitase-san says that the basic characteristics of our main characters are essentially the same. However, there are small little additions, you can kind of say layers to these characters' personalities that we may not necessarily have seen in so much depth in the original game, and quote, nuanced changes to how some things are shown in places reflecting the changes in the social conditions of the real world over the past 23 years. Obviously, this game needed to age with us as we've aged and reflect all these social conditions, everything that we've kind of seen and experienced throughout our lives and throughout the generations now. There have been mega changes to how people respond to certain events in the world, right? So it was only natural for the developers and the producers of this game to make characters in-game emulate how we would respond as people, to only make them more relatable and understandable as characters. And so, Kitase goes on to explain an example of this is how Avalanche questions their actions and, quote, agonize over their decisions and sometimes doubt the righteousness of their actions against the Shinra company, realizing that they may not be on the side of justice after all. So, as you can imagine, this is like an activist group fighting for the rights of people. But at the same time, because of an action that they carry out, going and bombing the reactor, they don't realize, obviously, that the aftermath wasn't just from their bomb, it was from Shinra, like kind of imploding their whole reactor on the inside and creating this whole catastrophe. But still, we see Avalanche struggling with this. We see Jessie like, what the hell? Did my bomb cause that? Like, what just happened, right? And this only reflects humanity. This reflects us as people. When something bad goes wrong, we'll question, like, what the heck just happened? I'm sure many of you, like me, have noticed that certain options have been taken away from us in the game. Notably, one of them for me was when we give the flower to either Tifa or Marlene in the original game. However, in the remake, we don't get to choose that. But there are new elements in the game where we get to choose responses and we get to choose how we say something to another character, right? So when asked about these new options in the game and how they allow to alter the storyline and essentially create your own sort of sideline version of the storyline, even though the main storyline doesn't change, but maybe how you interact with certain characters does, how certain characters become more important than others does, that sort of thing, Hamaguchi-san said the following. However, I was also aware that the story would be unpopular if it was so rigidly linear that it did not allow any player freedom at all. Therefore, we decided that every player will have the same experience in the main story, similar to watching a film, but implement choices at a certain points that illustrate the depth of characters and the in-game world. This lets players choose how they want to progress in the story, and it is quite captivating. I, for one, agree. And if you're like me, Eris has always been bae, so I've always picked the options that will, like, please Eris or make her, like, you know, more endeared towards Cloud and just love Cloud so much more. So, yes, this type of thing certainly affects relationships in the game, and it's going to be so cool to see how it affects, like, relationships with Red 13, Sid, Yuffie, Vincent, Kate Sith, the whole party. Like, I can just imagine all the things that we're going to be able to say and do, and my mind's like imploding with the magic of all of it. If you're wondering about new beautiful characters such as Roche, Madame M, Andrea Raldea, and Chocobo Sam, basically these have all been added to the game to essentially add something to the depth of the storyline in the game. And he said that he was conscious that I should only be adding to the game and its characters in order to deepen the in-game world of Final Fantasy VII. For Roche, he went into further explanation, saying, in his cutscenes you can also see a bond between Cloud and Roche. We can see that. So I'm quite excited to see what could happen for them in the future. I mean, who knows? If we're getting to choose relationships between Tifa and Eris, maybe Roche is a side option. Side bae, I don't know. And finally, like every other article that's probably ever existed out there with the age-old debate of Tifa versus Eris, somebody actually had the guts to ask Kitase-san, so, Tifa or Eris, bro? And I just love Kitase's response to this. We never talk about how characters relate with each other outside of what is depicted in the game. Our only focus has been how best to depict the characters in an appealing way as part of the remake. However, I also love to see the exciting discussions among the fans within the community, and it's something we've seen since the original game released. So yeah, there we have it. Basically, Kitase-san and the whole team is just loving how like everybody is out here like Team Eris, Team Tifa. Some people are like, yo, move over, it's Team Roche. Like, the producers are loving all of this craziness, all of the hype for every single character in the game, and to be honest, so am I. Like, you guys know I love Eris. You guys know that for me, Eris is bae, But honestly, all these characters are drop dead gorgeous. Like I and everybody else would be nuts to not say like how much amazing effort they put into every single one of these characters. So to not appreciate them all would just be, I don't know, it wouldn't give justice to the game, right? So I mean, from my perspective, I loved every single one of them, and that's how it's gonna remain. But yes, Eris is still kind of bae, you know? That's it from me in this FF7 Remake update, guys. Stay tuned and let's keep journeying on towards part 2 of the unknown journey ahead. Sayonara!